Hey all, this is a interesting planet craft I made that just involves really inexpensive pieces so you can show layers of a planet. So you have your core, your outer core, your mantle, crust, water, uh, life, and clouds. So that's all Play-Doh, and then you're gonna need floss for this. And it would be a good idea to have a couple little things like this, which are just dowels that I cut, and then maybe paper clips.
Cool.
Okay, so first you're going to start with the core of your planet. So I use a yellow color for that. So while you're doing this, you should imagine that really there's all these large rocks floating in space. So it'd be more of this grayish color, and these rocks are all colliding and grinding into each other and smashing into each other with the force of gravity. And that's actually what's making the core so hot, is that all these rocks are rubbing together, so you're getting a lot of friction. So the core is going to be the hottest part of the planet, where there's the most pressure and rocks rubbing together. So then you're going to take your next piece, your outer core, and you're going to wrap that. Once you've got a good sphere for your core, you're going to wrap your outer core around your core and do that as smoothly as possible and try to keep the same amount of thickness all the way around. So now we have the inner core with the outer core wrapped around it, and now we're going to go for the mantle, which is the next layer. And an interesting fact is lava is kind of like a Play-Doh consistency. It's actually pretty thick. And if you fell into lava, you wouldn't just sink in the bottom and die. You'd pretty much be stuck floating on top because it's really dense. Okay, so now we have our planet with the mantle wrapped all around. And now we're going to have the crust, which is the cooler layer on the outside. So this is the crunchy outside. And that's just going to be made out of the rock, which is floating over the mantle. So the crust is actually going to be very, very thin, like the shell of an egg. And then the yolk, you can imagine, would be the core of the planet. So you're going to make your crust really thin and spread it out as much as possible and cover up your mantle. Okay, so I've wrapped my crust around the semi-liquid mantle. Some of the mantle is actually leaking through because I made it a little bit too thin, and that's okay because this would be areas of maybe volcanic activity where the lava would flow out. So that still makes sense. And now I want you to imagine that there's comets just flowing through space, and these comets are now striking the Earth or the planet that you made, and those comets are ice. So when they strike the planet, this planet is quite hot. So now that ice is melting into water, and you're getting oceans because these are gigantic comets that are now hitting the surface of your planet. Okay, so now we have our planet, and it's covered with oceans. And there's still some spaces that I'm going to try to leave gray or brown to represent deserts and mountains. But at this point, now that you have water, you'll have microorganisms too, so your planet will now be able to sustain life. So you'll be able to have forests and other forms of life. So you're going to represent that with these green parts, which will represent your land and your vegetation. And you're going to want to smooth everything out the best you can. You might need to use a little bit of water so you don't have any cracking, but everything's going to be very smooth. You don't want anything to be bumpy or for there to be hard lines anywhere. So you just smooth that out. Okay, and now you want to add your last layer. So when I was adding these layers, I was very careful to leave some lava showing and also some of the desert and mountains that I was talking about. And then I smoothed everything as much as possible. You don't really want there to be hard edges. So you just smooth that with your finger, and you kind of want to blend everything together to make it look realistic. So now finally we're at the cloud layer, and you're just going to take little bits of the white for the atmosphere, and you can just put those wherever you want. And you're going to do the same thing and just spread those out. And just keep working it in until you have just little bits of cloud here and there. You don't want to cover everything, obviously. Okay, so now we have our planet. It's pretty well represented. There's no cracks because I've been smoothing it over with water, and I did my best to keep it a sphere. So this is kind of the exciting part. You might need help with this. But you're going to wrap the floss around the planet. And you want to make sure that you got it pretty much in the middle all the way around, so that you're not just slicing off a little corner. Okay, so then you take your two ends of floss, and this part's pretty exciting, and you just gently tighten it together like you were tying a knot. And then you have your earth, and you can see all the different layers. So you have your core, your outer core, the mantle, and then you also can see the crust, and then your vegetation and oceans as well. So some people don't really like that now you have these two halves and you can't really put them back together. So that's what these dowels are for. So you can actually just put those in place, and then you can just reassemble the two halves to put your planet back together. And then the final step that you're going to do, you could use these paper clips and embed those inside the planet too to make hooks so that this can be like an ornament. But the final step you're going to want to do is, once you have everything the way you like it, you might want to clean up some of the inside parts where there's smearing. You can just scrape those parts away. You're going to use your Elmer's glue and a brush, and you're just going to brush the glue all over the planet and let it dry, because the glue will make it so that the Play-Doh won't crack when it dries out. So there you go. That's how you make this craft.